Alright, here we have the Shorekeeper. Starting from the front, you can already see her silhouette resembles a butterfly. Now she doesn't have any wings exactly, unless you take this veil as one, but I wouldn't personally. But she does have the little tail things a lot of butterflies have. Generally speaking, she has a lot of butterfly elements, having butterflies on her veil, having little wings in the front here, as well as the tail as I just mentioned. I think the most notable thing about her design is the little tacit mark crystal, if you may, in the front of her, but we will go into closer detail later. From the side, you can see how long her veil is in comparison to her hair. You can see the giant bow she has on the back of her, even though her dress is kind of flat. It gives it a kind of like ballroom dress illusion. You can see how long the tails of her dress are, as well as the, interesting heels she has. From the back, you have her veil again, which splits into two. You can see more of her hairstyle, which seems to be more of a not quite jellyfish cut, but something adjacent. You have her open back, the big bow she has, as well as her black shores flower. If you haven't noticed yet, you can see that her design is very mirrored. Aside from her veil and the little tacit mark adjacent thing she has, she's very copy-paste on both sides, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but is actually quite on character. Most butterflies you see, even if they have different patterns on their wings, are symmetrical. Starting from the top, we have one of her most notable features, and that is her veil. Aside from being split down into two, with having a metal kind of wiring on one side and just some flowy fabric on the other, we do have a lot of butterfly symbolism. We have two butterflies here and more butterflies down here, though I am kind of confused if these are actual butterflies or just flowers that look like butterflies, because they didn't bother giving them any antenna. Her hair, as I've said before, is kind of jellyfish cut adjacent. We can actually remove her veil in a second. Removing her veil reveals that they actually bothered modeling the entire hair, which isn't common practice. Normally, with stuff like this, the hair is cut off under so it doesn't clip through what we have here, the veil. But this could actually mean that she could take off her veil anytime she wanted. I actually posted her hair on Twitter the other day if you just want 3 still views for art reference, but looking at it here, she has something shag cut jellyfish adjacent, as I've mentioned before. Like Chun-Li, she has different colored tips in her hair. Now this could be a theme with KuroGames if we wanted it to be, since the Shorekeeper actually isn't human, and I will explain more later as we go down, but in her report that was posted the other day, it actually explains she's made up of energy crystals. The theme that I'm seeing is that non-humanoid creatures just have these. We might have to continue keeping an eye on that. Unfortunately, you can't really see the closer details in game, but once we zoom in closer, you can actually see she has little sparkles in her eyes. Going further down, we have the top of her dress, and I actually have to admit that once her drip marketing was posted, I thought she was mostly exposed? In the drip marketing art, you can't really see this mesh too well. Of course, once you see it, you can't unsee it, but the first time I saw her, I didn't think she had anything to cover this part. And technically speaking, she still doesn't. This is mesh, but we can actually see the crystal tacit mark, if you may, under this mesh quite well. Meaning, this isn't opaque, and it doesn't cover jack shit. I do like that it's there, I just still think it's a little too much. Of course, she's a character that's supposed to resemble a butterfly and meant to be a bit more ethereal, but I don't know, maybe it's just not my type. Besides the mesh, we have what I mentioned before, the crystal tacit mark. Now, as I've said before, it can be debated if Shorekeeper is actually human. Her report states that she's just made up of energy crystals and keeps herself together by adding new ones, this being her tacit mark of the remnant energy she's made of. In-game, it explains that it has a certain blue glow, but I actually can't find that on her model. Usually these models have toggles with which you can simulate the tacit mark lighting up, but this actually doesn't have that. Speaking of her general outfit, we have something similar to her halter neck with her mesh and these really flowy parts of fabric which can be seen all over her. The fabric connects to her dress and goes all the way around to the back. This outfit kind of gives me ballerina vibes and does add to the ethereal theme. Giving you another cursed look at the Shorekeeper, after removing her hair and veil, we can actually see that the front and the back part of her halter is mirrored. At the back, we have these strings which connect all the way under the mesh to the front of the dress. This halter actually makes sense since we can see the fabric creasing in the front here, meaning that the strings attached to it are actually pretty taut. The only thing I can add is that the frilly thing she has isn't the only part of the halter. She also has like a kind of undertop here which does connect to the mesh. Moving on to her arm, the only thing she has here is a decorative kind of arm bracelet. It's actually similar to the halter she has, aside from the gemstone on it being different. Being the same in design, the strings on this thing go all the way down to her hand, crossing over a couple times until it reaches to this kind of ring thing. I know these have a name, I just don't know it right now. Regardless, meeting up as a ring on her hand, she doesn't have any gloves as the characters usually do, but just a little mesh triangle with another butterfly on it. Something I've mentioned before that I like about Kuro's models is that KuroGames actually gives these characters special nails. Shorekeeper, for example, has these really pretty blue-tipped nails, which, even though they are a different shade of blue, fit really well to her dress. Moving further down her dress, we have the butterfly symbolism as I've mentioned before. These kind of look more like fairy wings than butterfly wings, to be fair, but they are really fitting to the theme. Something I'm not too sure about here though is the fabric of these. Usually in KuroGames designs, we either have plastic or metal pieces which have these kind of holes in them, but this one, for example, has fabric texture while also having the kind of tech-like hole we usually have. It might just be that this line here separates fabric and plastic. Regardless, back to the topic of frilly fabric, she has a really pretty ballerina type skirt here. It does have another slit down it, which, okay, KuroGames. It has a lot of glitter on it, kind of fitting to her eyes, more butterflies, and removing the bow she has, it goes all the way around to the back. The only criticism I have of this is that we are bearing more skin. I don't know if the slit down here and another slit here was really necessary. Fortunately though, aside from this little top section here, you can't really see the second slit at the back. As I've called it before, the little poofy section and the big bow at the back of her, I'd personally call the tail. Most aren't as long, but there's definitely types that have these kind of tails. Honestly, she kind of looks like a swallowtail butterfly to me. Even though those don't have as long tails, they are blue and kind of have a little longer tail, though it isn't quite as long. Starting from the uppermost layer, she has the big bow, which notably has a Black Shores flower in it. For those that didn't quite catch it in the story, all of the Black Shores members have this flower. I'm sure we will learn closer what this is actually for, but let's say for now it's for identification. The bow is constructed of this really poofy underlayer and these two almost wing things at the top. Again, as I've mentioned before, this metal lining might just separate fabric and plastic or metal, as we have another hole here. Under the bow, she has these wing-like sections. Aside from the tail part, it actually has two more layers on top, which you can interpret as being folded upper wings. They are layered on top of each other and connected to the halter by this plate, which personally, I think this part isn't fabric, but actually a hip guard. Moving further down, we have her legs. Now, where other characters have stockings or socks, she has these little white parts. According to her resonance support, these are actually scars. I will probably make another video on her lore, but being made up of remnant crystals, they do dissipate over time, which means Shorekeeper has to add new crystals to herself, which results in these scars in the healing process. The most notable scar, I think, might be the one on her chest, where it goes all the way from her collarbone down to her chest, having another remnant crystal set inside of it. Besides knowing that they're scars, I think these little white details are really pretty, though again, I would have liked a little more design on the legs. They could have just continued continued the theme they had going on with the arm bracelet and halter, and could have just given her leg straps with strings that go all the way down to her shoes, but that's just personal preference. Kind of giving me beach vibes instead of ballerina this time. She has similar strings as before, connecting to the base of the shoe. Now, as I've mentioned before, Kuro has a lot of attention to detail, and the only thing I can say to this is that someone was paid to do this. Because besides her fingernails, her toenails actually were painted as well. Looking at the side of it, the base of her shoe is kind of interesting, seeing as she floats most of the time in her attacks. I don't have too much against this, but I personally couldn't walk on heelless shoes. They do have a really nice gradient inside though, which again fit to her nails and the outfit. All in all, her design is very butterfly and ballerina themed. I think it can be kind of excused that she's not wearing too much, though personally I wish she had more design on her. It doesn't even have to be a main part of clothing, just little jewelry, or as I've said, the leg strap with this theme would have been enough. I love her hairstyle and the kind of butterfly themes she has everywhere. Even though she has butterfly 1, butterfly 2, literally butterflies everywhere, I don't think it's too much in that regard. But yeah, I think that was it for the Shorekeeper's dissection. I wish you good luck on your polls and have a nice day. Bye bye.